So today we're talking about resilience, and I would define that as the ability to overcome something difficult or challenging, being able to persevere in the face of adversity, which to me is really about working through sticky points in your life, becoming aware of what those sticky points in your life are, and being able to sit in them and work through them so that they're not sticky points anymore. And that could be something that's physical, emotional, mental, whatever it happens to be. But you have to be able to recognize them first and then be able to work through them. The goal would be to make those sticky points become fluid points so that you can just move through life, go with the flow of things that you're doing, and never be, stopped. So a sticky point to me would be any point of tension or discomfort in your life. It's something that you feel is limiting. It doesn't mean that it is limiting, because it isn't limiting. I'd say it's about how you identify. So if you feel like you're a person that can be limited by anything, then you will encounter these sticky points in your life as you move through your day, as you experience things, as you interact with people, as you do physical things. If you think about children, and we're speaking in general terms here, I would say that they are very resilient. They don't come with any preconceived notion of some kind of stop or sticking point. They just exist in the world. Physically, mentally, they just do things and experience things. They don't have some kind of preconceived notion of things that they can't do. Sure, they might encounter things as they go along that are challenges, but they aren't defining themselves as limited in any way. They have no reason to believe that there's something that's going to limit them, because they haven't encountered anyone telling them that. They haven't encountered things that would make them think that. So if as adults we want to be resilient, then we have to think the same way. So if I were to give an example of a sticky point, and first we'll talk about something physical, and then we'll talk about something that's more emotional or mental. In terms of physical things, you can think of something that you have trouble doing. So in our gym at Human 2.0, we like to talk about people working through the things that are hard for them in order to strengthen the body and be as resilient as possible. You need to find the areas of your body that are weakest and then strengthen those areas. So for example, maybe you feel shoulder pain sometimes, or maybe when you're doing something as simple as a shoulder rotation or an arm rotation, you're just bringing your arm up and around. When you get to the point of that exercise where it becomes difficult, and so for most people, it's when they lift their arm up right at the top and then they're coming around to the back. That is what I would call the sticking point. It's where it's hardest for you, and that's the point where you want to sit. That's the point where you want to give it the most time, because wherever it's hard for you, that means that you're weak. Sure, a body can't do absolutely anything, but if we're talking in reasonable terms, there are things that a body should be able to do that lots of us can't do. So you need to find where those points are in a movement, or in movement in general, and then work in those areas. Stay in those spots. So if squatting down to the ground is hard for you, then you don't avoid squatting, because that would be something that could injure you in the future. If you were forced to squat and you can't squat easily, that's where you're going to get hurt. If you have weak wrists or ankles or knees or shoulders or whatever, if you're not working on those things, in particular those areas of the body, but even more specifically in certain movements where you will find a challenging part, don't skip through the challenging part. Stay in the challenging part. So that's in terms of physical, but you can also apply that same concept to anything that's emotional, mental, societal, like anything at all. If it's hard, we don't avoid it, because then it doesn't get fixed. It doesn't get strengthened, right? So if something is challenging for you, say you had an argument with a friend or something like that, and seeing that person again would be difficult. It would be a difficult conversation for you. If you value that friendship, hopefully you would, You don't want to just avoid that. You want to actually have the conversation so that you can move past it and then get on to having better times with that person. I think it's important to remember that just because you feel uncomfortable in a certain situation, again, whether it's physical movement, an emotional situation, or even something in your head, you're trying to solve a math problem or something and it's just really hard for you. It doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just means that you need to work through it. I just want to talk about pain for a minute and reframing pain in an effort to overcome sticky points and be more resilient. So I think a lot of us think of pain as something that is bad. And sure, there are some instances of pain you want to avoid. So if you're getting run over by a truck, maybe you don't want to experience that pain. I personally believe that we are living in a society now where people don't want to experience any kind of discomfort, and they associate that discomfort with pain that they should completely avoid. And that is physical, it's emotional, it's mental, it encompasses everything in our life, and we just tend to avoid it now. We have not learned to sit in the discomfort. We think it's pain, we think we don't want that, and then we just run from it or avoid it or whatever. And that is going to be the opposite of being resilient. You cannot move through anything that's difficult if you're always avoiding whatever discomfort you have and calling it pain. You have to reframe the pain and tell yourself that most of the time, you're not getting run over by a truck. You're experiencing things that are just regular daily life stuff that might be uncomfortable for you, but that's okay. And you can do it and you can move through it. So if you've experienced some kind of trauma in the past that you associate with pain, and I would say that there is some pain that is definite pain that you don't want to experience again. But I would also say that if you're still here, you haven't been run over by a truck, that whatever you experienced as a trauma, you should see it as something that you work through because you're actually still alive, still present on the earth, and that you could work through it again if you had to, but carrying the trauma and associating it with pain, moving forward in the future and any kind of experiences that you have is not going to help you move through those experiences any better. It's just going to make it worse. Trauma may be painful, but we're trying to say that pain is not a bad thing. If you're still living, it's discomfort, and it's something that you can work through and should work through if you're ever presented with it again. By understanding that the trauma is not bad, it's just uncomfortable. Whatever you experience in the future will probably be easier to deal with because you haven't compounded it with some past experience that you're holding on to. I would say that trauma is just tension in the energetic flow of life. And you want to release that tension in moving through new experiences so that it is not as difficult, it's not as uncomfortable, it's not as painful to experience them as you move forward. If you think about it in terms of, say, having a baby would be a good example. We learn as mothers to relax when you are going through labor. If you're tense, the pain, the discomfort, whatever you want to call it, is going to be worse. So that's why people take Lamaze classes. That's why people learn to breathe. That's why people learn to meditate or do things to relax themselves, why they have a baby in water, why they might hold somebody's hand, what all of these things that we learn to do in order to relax the body as it goes through an uncomfortable situation. Same thing for the mind. If you've experienced trauma or you're tense about something and you anticipate that it's going to be something that you cannot overcome, then it will be harder to overcome. And you will have to overcome it, likely, if you're trying to succeed at anything, fixing an old relationship, doing an exercise that's hard for you, whatever it happens to be. If you're trying to do it, but you associate the pain with bad, it's just going to be harder for you to work through it. So if you had a baby, and I've had 3 babies, if one of those babies was a difficult experience for you, you might tend to hold that in your mind when you're moving forward with the new pregnancy and the new delivery that you're going to have, which is not going to help that new delivery. It's just going to make it harder because you're already tense about the situation. So again, we learn in an effort to make the new delivery better, instead of focusing on the pain and trauma and the bad experience that you had, try to think about all the good things that came out of it, whatever they happen to be, and that's the focus, and that's all the focus is. So that moving forward in that new pregnancy and delivery, you come into it with, hopefully, a less tense, more resilient frame of mind. In retraining your mind in accordance with your natural ability to be resilient, whatever you experience in the future may not actually be as painful or painful at all compared to what may have happened in the past. I think you have to be compassionate with yourself and understanding, and give yourself a little bit of TLC in terms of approaching difficult situations. You really want to step into things as opposed to avoiding things. Whether you're stepping into them very slowly, whether you step into it and move away and then come back to it, that's fine. Nobody's saying that you have to just, rush into something and hit it hard and that's how you're going to achieve overcoming any problem. It doesn't have to be like that. If you had an injury on your knee or something like that and you're recovering from that, you don't just go from I can't walk to I'm running a marathon. It takes time and effort from your injury to wellness again. So you just want to think of it in terms of stepping forward. You want to take a step. Any step forward through that situation is good, and you want to actually do that. You want to create positive reinforcement, always looking for that. So anything, if you have a situation, any way that you move through it and any good that can come out of that, you remember that. Maybe you write that down. You come back to that always so that you can actually move forward. Movement confidence, that's what you're trying to build. And I'm not talking about just physical confidence, I'm talking about anything. Take steps to move through whatever's difficult or daunting to you or whatever it happens to be. Any sticky point in your life that is preventing you from getting to the place that you want to be is where you need to walk through and keep walking one step after another. People will anticipate that things that are difficult for them are going to take a long time to work through and that they're going to be hard, painful, all of those things. But don't assume that. Just assume that you're going to walk and move through it, find the good points in it, and just keep going. Because it might not take as long as you actually think it will to get to where you want to go. So in practical terms, I would say the very first thing that you need to do in order to be resilient is to remove from your mind and from your language that you're limited in any way. That is the absolute number one first thing that you need to do. You cannot associate with being limited. You can't say that you're limited. You can't tell somebody else that you're limited in any way at all, because that's just going to reinforce the fact that you are limited. You need to remove the identity of what you're not. Remove the blocks. You're not limited. Right? Unlimited on your phone screensaver. Say your goal is to be healthy. Ultimately healthy. First job is to remove any kind of limitation from your thoughts and from your vocabulary to the contrary of that. So you're healthy. You say that you're healthy. You think that you're healthy. You know that you're healthy. Next thing you're going to do with that in your mind is to take one step in that direction of being healthy, whatever it happens to be. It could be adopting a new food. It could be getting rid of the chips in your cupboard. It could be reducing your drinks of pop by 1 per day. Doesn't matter what it is. Make it a step, anything, in order to walk in that direction, step by step. exploring the path as you go along, educating yourself, talking to other people who also believe that thing, hanging around other people who also believe that thing, just living in that thing, and then you'll begin to just embody the thing that you actually want to be. You can imagine it like you're taking off your old identity, your old clothes, and walking into your new identity, your new clothes, and becoming the person that you actually want to be and are. So just as a takeaway, we are not going to be scared of pain. We're not going to give it any power over us. You want to hold the tension, and you want to allow it and yourself to be transformed by that experience.